Hi, everyone. My name is Tejas Ewing, and I'm here with my colleague Deepesh Vasudev,
Hello.
alumni of UWC Dover campus. I graduated a very long time ago, back in 1998. And I currently work with Deepesh. We're both smartphone filmmakers. We specialize in making films for all sorts of different purposes, including film festivals, corporate videos, and other such videos. And lately, we've been focusing on doing this purely using smartphones. Both of us happen to use Sony Xperia smartphones. And the world and the way smartphones are working nowadays, you actually can be a filmmaker purely on smartphones. And so, what I really wanted to talk about in this careers video is the idea that there are alternative and new ways of doing creative projects. So, Deepesh and I work together under the name of Duet. My company is also called Ewing Communications. And so we're self employed when it comes to our filmmaking work. Deepesh is a student at NUS, and I'm fully self employed. When it comes to the filmmaking, obviously, I run everything through my company. I'm in charge of the company, but I also teach smartphone filmmaking at a number of schools and universities around Singapore. I've taught guest lectures at UWC, for example, and many other high schools at NUS, and I'm a regular adjunct lecturer at NAFA and NTU. So the teaching certainly is a big part of my life as well, but everything I do is related to the idea of filmmaking. So in this conversation, Deepesh and I are both going to give a little bit of feedback because Deepesh is much closer to the age that you guys all are at UWC. He graduated quite recently, and he's balancing being a filmmaker as well as a university student. So he has some thoughts, and interestingly enough, Deepesh doesn't study film, so he'll have some thoughts about that. I also didn't study film, so we definitely want to bring that up. But given that this is a conversation about filmmaking, I thought it would be very important to show a film. So we're going to start with a film called Gaia, which has a strong environmental message. So I think you guys at UWC will find it interesting.
They're all dead. At least I think they are. Visions are getting worse. It's hard to know what's real anymore. You need to cut off all access to this island immediately. It's not the sanctuary we hoped for. Dr. Pierce was right. Pula Ubin is defending itself from within. Nymphia alba variation 11 is the most dangerous of all. The plant is adapting new defenses every minute. When the flowers bloom, something happens to your mind. There's no cure. I don't have much time left. The earth seems to be finding ways to protect itself from us. The plant doesn't want to be a tool to prolong humanity's existence. Gaia is real. If we're going to survive, we can't be a threat anymore. We need to find a new way. I know the corporation won't believe me. The only hope is that everyone sees what happened to us. Put this online immediately. Initiating neural transfer. Gaia is real. Gaia is real. Gaia is real. Don't ignore her anymore.
I would love to, I don't want to be responsible for a death.
I'm dead, bye.
Okay, my name is...
He doesn't follow my instructions, so he's gonna die. How do you feel, dude?
I'm actually a bit scared, but you guys are there, so I'm fine.
3 paths. There's only 2.
Can you say that again? What?
There are only 3 paths. There are only 2 paths. There's only 3. I really want to go see. I'm scared. I'm actually scared.
Dude, the moment you say you're scared, I'm getting scared.
Dude, honestly, if I think about, like, the more I think about what we're doing now, right, the more scared I get. Like right now.
Oh, that's Felix.
Here, here, here.
Where? Stop.
There, there, there. Maybe please come back. Because we don't know where we're going anymore.
Wait, so stop. I want to go back to
We don't know where we're going anymore. We just saw this.
Listen, roughly, right? I think I know where we're going. Come.
Dude, are you serious? Roughly.
Dude, we know where we're
No, I
going.
feel like the big circle, dude. Relax.
Okay.
Going towards.
Okay, fine.
Okay, there's something there. Can you see that?
Yeah, there's something there.
Yeah. What is it? It's not moving.
There's just
Yeah, maybe.
there on the
There.
left, on the left.
In that corner.
No, it's an eye, it's an eye. It's
Someone's there. Someone's there.
I know I saw.
Where is that?
Maybe it's
Let's see. Should I stop my light?
sign here, sign here.
Should I stop my light?
Yeah, switch off your lights.
No, what's that? Whoa, what is that?
There are more.
I want to make it very clear that when it comes to doing creative pursuits, you don't necessarily need to study that subject. The most important thing, if you want to be a writer or a filmmaker or a musician, the most important thing is to actually do it. If you feel that studying it is going to benefit you, then you should. The reason I'm bringing this up is I just want you all to know, especially when it comes to something creative, there's many different ways you might get into it. It might come later in your life, it might come earlier, but there's nothing wrong with studying something else at university. So Deepesh, why did you choose to study something different at university?
For me, the main reason was, like you said, I think apart from the short courses that we did, I think we have learned way more from actually doing film. And I think, especially when it comes to something where there's storytelling involved, there's a lot more that you have to experience life more and understand more things about it. So I think I'd rather spend more time learning things outside of film, which will in turn influence our filmmaking. So that was my thinking when I decided not to do film.
And actually, we've had some recent experiences which are quite interesting. Number one, most film schools will not teach you about smartphone filmmaking because most film schools are still quite focused on technology and they'll try to provide you the best camera and the best sound equipment. But what you need to remember is that once you're actually out there on your own, you might not have access to all that equipment. So if you become too reliant on the equipment, then you're not necessarily going to be able to function as an independent filmmaker. The second thing that we've noticed is that when you go to a film schools, a lot of film schools tend to have a very specific style. So in Singapore, we've noticed that the style of most schools here, and there are other countries that have this too, Canada is quite similar, is very emotional, kind of sentimental, long shots, pastel colors, piano music, stories about families that are having disagreements.
From a creative standpoint, it's always better to have your own voice. And what audiences do look for is that unique voice, especially in films. So I agree with your point, yeah.
And I would say, like, of course, there are some technical skills that everybody needs to learn if they want to be a filmmaker. And those technical skills can be learned at university or you can teach them yourself. But you all, like Deepesh just said, you also need to have a voice. And what I find interesting about studying different subjects, like Deepesh is just starting at university. At university, I did liberal arts. Geography is liberal arts. I learned a lot of things about human behavior and how humans function, which helped me a lot in my stories. Whereas if you only study film and film and film, you're learning all the technical sides, but you're not really learning about how the world works and how people function. I'm not I'm not in love with technology, and I'm not in love with having to spend a lot of money and a lot of time doing things. The history of film has always been one where technology is always trying to make it simpler, and then the powers in control will always try to fight against that, because the more expensive filmmaking is, the fewer people who can do it, and then those who already have the power can maintain that power. But every new innovation in film, like 16 millimeter or handheld cameras or any of those kind of things, they've made filmmaking more available to the masses. They've democratized it. So I still go to film festivals when I can, and I try to go to the educational programs. And many years ago, this was basically almost 7 years ago, I went to a film festival, and in a very small room with very few attendees, there was a guy talking about the idea that maybe you could make films on a smartphone, and he showed a few clips. And the whole field was so new that his clips, he didn't have a lot to show, and he was very honest about the fact that this is a new field. But what I immediately saw is the potential to be able to do it on your own without needing a huge crew and without needing $100,000. And so as soon as I saw that, I thought to myself, this is something worth pursuing. How about you, Deepesh?
So, film wasn't my first passion. I was actually more into engineering and robotics when I was younger. But then slowly I discovered I had this gap in my life where I was switching schools, and I had 6 months where I did nothing. And then I discovered films, and I was watching movies every day. And it came about where I thought, like, this is actually really like affecting me in an emotional and personal level, and I wanted to discover whether I could do it. So I started pursuing it and seeing if I was good at it, and then slowly I realized that this might be actually something that's worthwhile for the rest of my life. So that's how I entered filmmaking.
Cool. I would say the other big change that has happened recently is the progression of the technology. So even when I started, smartphones were good enough to do short films, but you sometimes wondered if they would be good enough for a feature. But like with the Sony phones that we use, they can shoot in 4K HDR. They have 3 lenses. So basically everything you need is already on the phone. So I'm going to say very strongly, just because I want people to feel free to think outside the box, that both of us are taking a non-traditional approach, and both of us are noticing a huge amount of benefits from that. I'll just give an example. So like most film schools cost between 50 and 75,000 US dollars. In general, if you look at lists, they will say the best film schools are in America. And of course, on paper, that's true. But 75,000 times 4, I mean, if you add everything up, including the cost of living, you're going to spend between 300 and 400,000 on film school. You could make 10 feature films for that amount of money. You could actually make 20 feature films for that amount of money. And the first film would probably be terrible, and you might not even finish, and you might tear your hair out and cry. But by the time you're finishing the 10th film, if you don't know what you're doing by that point, then you probably shouldn't be a filmmaker. So I would say that the fact that I've saved $400,000 and I can put that into my actual films and working with people like Deepesh, I would say that as nothing but a benefit. So I'm not saying you shouldn't go to film school, but you definitely don't need to. If you get a scholarship to study English Lit and you don't get a scholarship to study film, I would say go study English Lit. If you're able to study geography at a school that you like and you don't need to pay $85,000, I would say go study geography. All of those things will help you in your creative career. And you can, if you're not committed enough to teach yourself how to make films, then you need to consider, if you're only doing it when somebody else is there to teach you, then again, you do have to question if it's the right career for you. How about you, Deepesh?
For me, it's absolutely non-traditional. The selection and the process of it, because from being an Indian background, uh, telling your parents or like telling your friends around you that I'm going to pursue filmmaking, especially like at this age, it's considered like uh, it's almost considered like career suicide. Like, what are you doing? What are you thinking?
Hmm.
You're worrying about all these things, but what people don't realize is actually there's an ample amount of opportunities in Singapore, even in Singapore, and it's all about finding those opportunities and like utilizing them. And and another non-traditional aspect is the whole smartphone element.
Hmm.
And I'll be honest, in the beginning, I was a bit like maybe this might not work because and even the film school aspect that you mentioned, I really wanted to go to film school. I did apply, and I yeah. But then now I'm realizing that actually the smartphones are amazing, and they're gonna like help us save so much money for our feature films. And not going to film school, I think, has been one of the best decisions of my life because now I can actually I feel like I'm learning more than I would have if I went to film school.
Yeah, and Deepesh is being very humble, but he actually got into UCLA Film School, which is one of the best in the world, if not top three. Uh, but one, obviously, of course, you also never know what's going to happen in the world. But I know that Deepesh feels lucky that he's not stuck in California in the middle of a COVID outbreak, paying because like universities in COVID, they're still asking you to pay the fees, and they're not providing the teaching. But the other reason that he made that decision is that he found out that in your whole 4 years of undergrad film school, how many films do they make?
So they actually the first 2 years is more film theory, but it's only one module each, like semester. So you're mostly doing general education stuff for the first 2 years.
Yeah.
Then year three and year four is where it gets practical, but you only like do I think one short film a year. So you end up with only two short films in those 4 years.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Obviously you would have the freedom to do more if you wanted, but university being what it is, most people are not going to do extra because university is very stressful. But I just like to point out, so that's two short films in 4 years. This year alone, we've made something like 15 short films. So and a
Mm.
lot of them have been in festivals and have been used for other things where we're getting exposure. So there are a lot of benefits to taking a non-traditional approach if you're willing to push yourself hard enough. That's really what it's all about. Film is a very interesting discipline. It's a creative discipline where you also have to be very technical and you have to be very organized. Like the most fun part of making a film is coming up with the idea. The least fun part about the film is probably actually shooting the film and editing it, because then that's very technical. I still enjoy those things, but it's like it's like anything in life. It's the hard stuff which separates those who can do it from those who can't do it,
Mm.
because everybody in our screenplay class came up with a decent idea, and in any film school everybody will come up with a decent idea, but whether they're actually able to execute it is a totally different story. So I think you speak to any filmmaker and they'll say the nuts and bolts, the nitty gritty details, those are the things that are maybe not as much fun, but I try to see it as a puzzle and fitting the puzzle pieces together. And then I will also say you should choose good collaborators, because Deepesh and I get along well. And so no matter how stressful it's getting, we tend to be on the same page and things work out in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, for me, I think there are it isn't a particular thing. There are moments where you go like, this is not nice at all. I'm not enjoying myself. But there have been moments where the exact same thing. For example, you talked about the creative aspect. That's I think always has been enjoyable for the both of us. And for the execution, it does get tough. But at the end of the execution, when everything comes together, like that feeling is like the best feeling you'll have in the whole process. And if you actually get addicted to that feeling, that means I think the chance of you becoming a very good filmmaker is very high,
Yeah.
because you have to look for that joy.
Yeah,
That
because like
actually, yeah.
between September and November, we had to finish 11 films in only 2 months, including shooting, editing, color correction, special effects. And some of the films were coming out week after week, like there was a fixed schedule. So I'm not going to pretend it wasn't stressful, but if you enjoy the output, it's also fun. All you really need is a mentor. You need somebody who is willing to help you. And what I wish I had known is how helpful people in the creative industry actually are. You're raised to believe that it's totally cutthroat and everybody's out to get one another. That's really not true, especially when you're starting. Like, I will help anyone who has a question. I might not go and make their film for them, but I will provide help, because I believe when you're passionate and starting out, we need to support each other. Interestingly enough, Singapore and Southeast Asia is probably one of the most booming markets for creative output, like online film, short films, feature films, whatever. Every single major studio is opening up an office in Singapore. Singapore is one of the few places where theaters have been functioning almost entirely through COVID. The only thing that may contract because of COVID is big Hollywood blockbuster films. But let's be honest, when you're starting out in filmmaking, you can never assume that you are going to be the next Mission Impossible director. The only thing that you can actually control is the productions that you do yourself, independent films that maybe you put on YouTube, or maybe you sell to a small streaming platform like Vidsy or View, or if you're lucky, Netflix buys it. But things that you control yourself, that side of filmmaking is absolutely booming, and it's growing like exponentially. What you need to do is exactly what Deepesh is doing. You need to make films. To be honest, like I make films, and I'm the one who goes out and gets the business. That's the other thing that Deepesh probably doesn't like doing as much. I go out and find the clients, and I find the people, and I find the money, and then we go and make the films. Because I'm older and I have some kind of track record and people like talking to me, that's normal. But I am willing to work with Deepesh because he has proven to me that he can actually make films. Somebody could come to me with a degree from NYU where they've studied an undergrad in film, and if they've only made 2 films, to be frank, I'm not super interested in working with them, because I feel like they've had a fun time at a school where they probably enjoyed themselves, but they haven't proven that they can actually go out and be self-directed and make half of the film or 80% of the film by themselves, which is what any producer needs. We need people who we know can actually go and do the work. Of course, we're going to check it later and we're going to give extra feedback, but we need to know that it's going to come back done. You can't expect a standard entry-level salary, but you also don't need to be the kind of person where you're out there making your films for free and every job you do is for free because you're hoping to get exposure. Like Deepesh has only been doing it for 4 years, starting from zero, and he's already getting paid a decent salary for the projects that he does. We've had to go quite quickly through all of the questions that UWC wanted us to answer. So what I'll say is that please do get in touch with us in the future if you have further questions, or if this video has sparked any inspiration or made you think about becoming a filmmaker. As I said, the one thing I wished I knew was that there are mentors available, and we are more than happy to help you in your journey. We often take interns for our various productions. We're definitely going to be looking for interns for our feature film, for actors and performers as well, and for anybody who's willing to help and learn at the same time. So what we're going to do to finish this, again, since this is about filmmaking, we're going to show a very short film that we made recently. We did this entire film in basically 2 days using only smartphones, and we finished it including filming and editing in just that weekend, just to kind of show what you can do with smartphones when you're ambitious and you have a good idea. So we're going to show that video now. And then please stay till the end of that video. It's only 3 minutes long. Please stay to the end and you'll find our contact details, email and Facebook for me, and Instagram and email for Deepesh. And you can reach out to us if you have any further questions, or if you decide that you want to be a filmmaker, please do let us know. And if you've made any films and you want feedback, feel free to send them to us. So hope you enjoy the final film. It's called Play With Me. We'll say goodbye now. As I said, stay to the end for our contact details. It's on the final slide. And we do look forward to hearing from you soon. Bye for now.
CJ, play with me.
Get lost.
Take your brother out fishing. We bought all this stuff. It was your idea.
To get him out of my way.
He can't go alone. You take him.
Fine, fine, let's go. Ishan! 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 Ishan, it's not funny.